When I entered the courtroom that morning, my daughter Lena barely tried to hide her disdain. She rolled her eyes and leaned toward her husband, Trent, whispering something that made them both smirk. Then, without warning, everything changed. The judge looked up from his papers and stared directly at me. His expression stiffened, as though he had just seen a ghost from his past. In a quiet voice, almost to himself, he said, "It's her." A heavy silence fell over the room. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Fingers froze above keyboards, and even the bailiff shifted uneasily. Lena's confidence faltered, and Trent's smirk faded into confusion. They didn't understand the weight of those words, but I did. I had lived long enough to know when something significant was about to unfold. To them, I was nothing more than a frail old woman stubbornly holding on to a house. They believed they had already taken everything from me, my control, my dignity. What they failed to see was that my past held a strength far greater than their ambition. In Riverton, my days followed a quiet, familiar rhythm. I woke at 6, filled my old kettle, and reached for the chipped mug that had been part of my mornings for over 2 decades. The scent of coffee would drift through the kitchen as I tended to the African violets lined along the windowsill. My late husband, Harold, had loved those flowers. Caring for them made me feel as though a part of him still lingered beside me. My life had never been remarkable by most standards. It was built on small routines, each one carrying memories of love and sacrifice. I hadn't traveled far or known luxury, but I had devoted myself entirely to raising my daughter. I worked late into the night cleaning offices, baked pies to sell at church gatherings, and repaired clothes for neighbors, anything to give Lena opportunities one never had. To others, I may have seemed like just another quiet grandmother, but my life had been shaped by years of quiet resilience. That Thursday evening, I had hoped to bring back a sense of warmth between us. I spent hours preparing Harold's favorite meal, chicken and dumplings, the same dish Lena used to beg for when she was little. I spread out my embroidered tablecloth, one I had stitched years ago, and placed fresh flowers in the center. I wanted her to remember that this house was still her home, filled with love. But when they arrived, Trent immediately claimed Harold's armchair, turning on the television as if he owned the place. Lena stood nearby, wearing the green dress I had once bought her, her face distant and cold. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her tone formal, almost unfamiliar. She explained that the house was too much for me now, that I couldn't manage it anymore. They needed the space for their growing family, and they had already found a retirement home they thought would suit me perfectly. My voice trembled as I reminded her what this house meant, how her father had spent his final moments here, how every corner held a memory, but she only replied, "Memories live in the heart, Mom, not in a building." A few days later, Trent showed up unannounced with a real estate appraiser. The man walked through my home with clinical detachment, measuring rooms and jotting down notes as though the place had already been sold. "The plumbing is outdated," he remarked. "The tiles are old, it'll need a full renovation." I stood quietly, gripping my apron. Those same tiles had been laid by Harold's hands, one by one, years ago. I could still picture the effort, the pride he took in building something meant to last. Now, they were nothing more than flaws on a checklist. Lena followed the appraiser, agreeing with his observations, never once meeting my eyes. Each comment felt like a blow. To them, the house had lost its meaning, it had become just another asset. The following week, they returned with a lawyer. Trent carried himself with an air of ownership, while Lena kept her distance. The lawyer placed a stack of documents on my dining table and spoke in a carefully measured tone. "These are the transfer papers, Mrs. Whitaker, once signed. Everything will be arranged for your comfort." As I read, the words blurred together: ownership transfer, permanent, irrevocable. It became painfully clear, they weren't selling the house, they were taking it. When I refused, Trent's patience vanished. "You're not capable of making decisions anymore, Nora," he said sharply. "Lena is acting in your best interest." The lawyer added, almost gently, "If necessary, we may need to pursue legal action regarding your mental capacity." The room seemed to tilt. My own daughter, the one I had sacrificed everything for, was now trying to take what little I had left. My hands trembled, but I stood my ground. "I'm not signing anything." That night, sleep never came. I sat alone in Harold's chair, the silence pressing in around me. For the first time, doubt crept in. Were they right? Had I become too old, too weak to fight back? The thought hurt more than anything Trent had said. I looked at the photographs on the wall, moments from a lifetime, Lena as a baby, Harold beaming with pride, Our family gathered in happier times. Every image was proof of a life spent giving to others. And now, I was being treated as if I no longer mattered. I whispered into the stillness, "Harold, I don't know how to face this on my own." The following afternoon, drifting through the house like a shadow, I opened Harold's old desk. Inside were the usual things: old bills, envelopes, familiar papers, but beneath them lay something I had never seen before, a slim folder secured with a tiny lock. My breath caught. I searched until I found a small brass key hidden inside one of Harold's old investment books. My hands trembled as I unlocked it. Inside were neatly arranged documents, each marked with Harold's initials. Most were contracts and statements I barely understood, but one stood out immediately: a will, signed just 6 months before he passed. As I read, everything I thought I knew began to shift. Harold had been far more deliberate than I had ever realized. What Lena and Trent believed they could take from me was only a fraction of what truly existed. Harold had never spoken much about money. I had always assumed we lived simply, but the papers told a different story. Over the years, he had quietly invested, buying properties, purchasing stocks, even acquiring land outside Riverton that had grown immensely in value. The figures were overwhelming. And then came the greatest revelation. The building where Lena and Trent lived, the one they thought they rented, belonged to us. Their rent, along with that of every other tenant, had been going into an account now under my name. For 2 years, that money had been accumulating, untouched. I wasn't just a widow holding on to a house. Harold had left behind something far greater, something Lena and Trent had no idea existed. At the bottom of the folder, I found a letter addressed to me in Harold's handwriting. As I unfolded it, I could almost hear his voice. He wrote of love, of gratitude for all I had done, and of his desire to protect me. He admitted he had never fully trusted Trent, sensing something cold and calculating beneath his charm. That was why he had arranged everything the way he had. If Lena treated me with love, she would share in what he built. If not, the decision would be mine. Use it wisely, he wrote, not to harm, but to teach. By morning, my tears had dried, replaced by a calm resolve. I went about my routine: coffee, flowers, quiet reflection, but this time, I felt steady. When Lena and Trent arrived with movers, expecting me to be ready to leave, they found me sitting peacefully, as if nothing had changed. "Mom, what are you doing?" Lena asked. "I'm not going anywhere," I replied. Trent stepped forward, confident and dismissive. "You don't have a choice." I met his gaze. "Actually, neither do you." When he ordered the movers to begin, I stopped them. Then I picked up one of the documents and spoke calmly. "Did you know the apartment you've been living in was never yours?" Confusion spread across Lena's face. Trent's confidence began to crack. "You've been paying rent," I continued, "but it's been coming to me. I own that building." Silence filled the room. Trent denied it at first, calling it a bluff, but the truth was written plainly before him, and with it came a reality he couldn't control. "You have 30 days, I said. "After that, I can legally evict you." Lena's composure broke. "Mom, please. Family doesn't do what you tried to do," I answered. Desperate, Trent pushed Lena to reveal something. Her voice trembled. "Mom, I'm pregnant." The words struck deep. For a moment, my resolve wavered, but Harold's words steadied me. "Not to hurt, but to teach." "Congratulations," I said quietly, "but that doesn't undo your choices." For the first time, Lena hesitated, not because of me, but because of Trent. When she asked him to apologize, he refused, his anger spilling out. In that moment, something in her shifted. She began to see him clearly. Turning back to me, she admitted the truth: how she had been influenced, how she had chosen the easier path instead of the right one. I listened, then answered simply, "Words are a start, actions will matter more." 2 weeks later, Trent returned, angry, desperate, and drunk, demanding Lena back as if she were property. But this time, things were different. With a single call, my attorney confirmed what he refused to believe: everything stood in my name. For once, he had nothing to say. What followed was inevitable. He filed a lawsuit, making wild claims and threats, even trying to use the unborn child as leverage. But this time, I was ready. With my attorney's help, we gathered everything: messages, recordings, witness accounts, each piece revealing the truth of who he was. At the kitchen table, we prepared carefully. I was told to speak only the truth, plainly and without fear. Beside me, Lena practiced her statement, her voice unsteady as she faced her own reflection. I turned against my mother because it was easier than admitting the truth. I was wrong. Hearing Lena say those words out loud hurt, but it was necessary. In court, nothing mattered more than the truth. The morning of the trial arrived under a gray, heavy sky. Trent walked in with an expensive lawyer, his confidence bordering on arrogance. He looked at me the same way he always had, with quiet contempt. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I knew the truth would speak for itself. His lawyer tried to paint me as a bitter, controlling old woman, someone clinging to the past and using money to ruin her daughter's life. The accusation stung, but I stayed silent, waiting. When our turn came, Camille stood and calmly presented the facts, messages filled with insults, recordings of threats, and witnesses ready to testify. One by one, the pieces came together, and Trent's confidence began to crumble. Then something unexpected happened. The judge took off his glasses and studied me. "Mrs. Whitaker." "Nora Whitaker," he said gently, "do you remember me? 30 years ago, family court, you helped a struggling intern who stayed late trying to keep up." It clicked. Behind the authority and age, I recognized him, Marcus Ellery, the young man I had once encouraged. "Marcus," I said softly, emotion tightening my voice, "of course I remember." The room fell silent. Trent's lawyer quickly objected, claiming bias, but the judge remained firm. "There is no conflict here," he said, "only the facts, and they are clear. Mr. Maddox is the one who has manipulated this situation." In that moment, everything shifted. A small kindness from decades ago had found its way back to me. The ruling came swiftly. Every one of Trent's claims was dismissed. The judge declared that there was no evidence against me, only proof of Trent's intimidation and emotional abuse toward both Lena and me. The gavel fell. Trent was ordered to stay away from us, stripped of any immediate parental rights, and required to pay damages along with court costs. His confidence vanished. For once, he had nothing left to say. Beside me, Lena cried quietly. I placed my hand over hers, not in triumph, but as a reminder that healing was still ahead. Outside the courthouse, she held on to me and whispered, "Mom, we're free." But freedom didn't erase the past. When Lena moved back home, things were fragile. I made my expectations clear. "If you stay, you contribute, you take responsibility, and you earn back trust." She agreed without hesitation. At first, we spoke little, just the basics of daily life, but slowly, I began to notice change. She cleaned up without being asked, kept her space in order, and even started caring for Harold's violets. One day, I found her folding laundry. She looked up and said quietly, "I want you to see I can do better." It wasn't dramatic, but it mattered. I reminded myself, real change shows through actions, not promises. As time passed, I realized Harold's legacy shouldn't stop with us. Too many women had faced what I had, being dismissed, controlled, or pushed aside. With Camille's help, I created the Second Porch Foundation, a place for women who needed a fresh start, a safe space, and dignity. We called it Second Porch because everyone deserves another place to belong when the first one is taken from them. In the first year alone, we helped 15 women rebuild their lives. Their stories echoed my own, families who turned against them, homes taken, voices ignored. Letters began arriving, filled with gratitude. One read, "You reminded me that I still matter." That meant everything. 5 years later, the garden in Riverton was full of life. My granddaughter Isla, now 4, ran through the yard chasing butterflies, her laughter filling the air. Lena stood on the porch, preparing lunch, her life rebuilt piece by piece. She had returned to school, built a career, and, more importantly, found herself again. One afternoon, I received an invitation to open the third Second Porch home. Dozens more women would soon have a place to start over. Not long after, Judge Marcus Ellery visited with his wife. Smiling, he said, "Nora, what you've built has inspired so many. We'd like to honor you for it." As Isla climbed into my lap and handed me a small yellow flower, I thought about everything that had changed. The pain, the betrayal, the fear, it had all led somewhere meaningful. I realized then that strength isn't about raising your voice or fighting harder than everyone else. It's about standing firm in the truth and refusing to disappear. Harold had told me to use what I had not to harm, but to teach. And that's what I tried to do. Lena learned that respect must be earned, not demanded. And I learned that dignity is something we must protect, no matter what. If any part of this feels familiar, remember this. You are not powerless. Even in your darkest moment, you still have the right to stand, to speak, and to reclaim your place. Sometimes, life comes full circle in unexpected ways, like a judge remembering a kindness from decades ago. And sometimes, the greatest victory is simply refusing to be pushed aside. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who might need it. Let it remind others that dignity doesn't fade with time, it endures.